Hello and welcome to RTO Doctor and today's update, an important one for industry, particularly CEOs and executive management of registered training organisations and CRICOS providers generally speaking, whether they're registered training organisations, ALICOS, higher education, doesn't really matter as long as they're CRICOS as well. They're captured in this live video. What I wanted to talk to you about this afternoon was some recent trends and concerns regarding registration cancellations by ASQA in particular. We seem to be getting more and more inquiries for AAT matters across our desk for the same things over and over again, and it's becoming a bit of a concern to me at RTO Doctor that there still appear to be so many people around the country who are being impacted and affected by these sorts of issues, because really in terms of the management and governance of an RTO, these sorts of things that we're seeing just shouldn't be happening where there is good governance in place. And I can see that we have Nicole following us. Thank you, Nicole, for following us. I hope the information that I'm going to share today will be valuable for you. So I really want to touch on a few areas that will hopefully give you an indication of some of the things that the regulator seems to be focusing on at the moment, in the hope that you will be able to better prepare yourselves for an external audit that may or may not take place, or in the event that you get questions, just so that you can be better prepared, basically. And just going by a short list, I just wanted to let you know that there seem to be more and more cancellations as a direct result of an audit. Once upon a time, there was an opportunity for RTOs in particular to provide rectification evidence with a 20 working day period once they got their notice of non-compliance. So often what would happen was they would get their audit, they would be told during the exit interview that there was a certain amount of non-compliance and these are the issues that they needed to address. They would then wait perhaps 2 to 3 weeks for the audit report to arrive, and during that 2 to 3 weeks they had time to start making any rectification evidence available. Then the audit report arrived and they would traditionally have a 20 working day period in which to rectify the non-compliance and submit the evidence of rectification to the regulator. What we're seeing a lot of, probably over the last 12 months, is that the regulator has taken a position where that is actually not a mandatory requirement under the NVR Act for them to provide that 20 working days. And they say that it is not obligatory and it's optional. If they wish to provide 20 working days, they will. If they don't wish to, then they don't have to. And therefore what they're doing more and more that we're seeing is they're just directly cancelling RTOs and not giving that 20 working day notice. So if you're planning on addressing any rectification from your audit report, or you've got an audit pending and you're waiting for that 20 working days, don't perhaps wait on it as a way of trying to address your non-compliance, because you, in most cases, will not receive it. ASQA are becoming more and more strict in relation to what their outcomes for regulation are, and rather than taking an approach where they're a little bit more friendly, they're becoming a little bit more dictatorial and draconian in their measures. I have a question here from Kim. What about an RTO cancelling a course and making me still pay for that course when it doesn't start till after June? Kim, every RTO has its own policies and procedures relating to cancellation of enrolment and fee refunds. There are certain requirements under the Standards for Registered Training Organisations 2015. If you're an international student on a student visa, you would also have entitlements under the National Code 2018. It depends on the circumstances of the RTO cancelling the course and what their fees and refund policy was at the time. If you wanted to get in touch with me as an inbox message with a phone number, perhaps, I'm happy to give you a call and talk through that with you. And I can also see Kaz is there. So hi, Kaz. If you have those sorts of questions where the issue is really on an individual level, I'm happy to take those questions as an inbox message or something like that. However, for those sorts of individual messages, it's not necessarily appropriate to address them as part of a live video. So more than happy to try and assist you there, Kim, but I'm asking you if you could please just contact me via a direct message and we can take it from there. So one of the other things that we're finding more and more with ASQA non-compliance notices and cancellations is an increase in the remediation requirements. And what we're finding is that when RTOs are getting their initial non-compliance notice and they submit an application for reconsideration, for example, they may submit evidence of rectification during the reconsideration, but they don't seem to be addressing the remediation requirement. Now, ASQA make it very clear in their audit reports now what the remediation requirement is, and it's usually that the RTO does address any harm that has been or has potentially been caused to any student who may have been impacted by the non-compliance that's been identified. Usually that will go back over the past 6 months and for all qualifications that are impacted, as well as all students who have been enrolled in those qualifications. So it's really important that if you see that requirement for remediation in your audit report, that you don't neglect it, that you do address it, and you do identify all of the students who could be impacted. It's really important as well to remember the link between the data that you submit as part of your event misreporting requirements and now the USI register and any student enrolments that you have and completions and so forth. So if it doesn't come up now, it could potentially come up later during an audit based on data collection. And of course, all RTOs would have recently gone through the annual declaration of compliance. And most RTOs will have identified that they have no non-compliance, and it's just an open invitation to the regulator to come in and say, well, you said that there was no non-compliance, you said that all of your certification was in accordance with the standards, so where is it? Show us where the problem has been addressed. In line with that, one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is marketing and promotional materials, particularly websites. I've spoken about this a number of times in the 30 Days, 30 Tips series, both 1 and 2, about how having a non-compliant website is a recipe for disaster, and it's really just opening the doors to the regulator saying, come and see me. It's like the shop front to your RTO, and it's open to the public. So not only is it important from a regulatory perspective and making sure that the regulator stays at bay, but it's also important to make sure for those people who are genuinely trying to do the right thing that all of the pre-enrollment information that you're providing to students is accurate and they're getting all of the information that they need to make an informed decision about any course that they're looking at studying or whether or not they wish to study with you as a provider. One of the things that I'm seeing more and more in relation to marketing non-compliance is people have got generic student handbooks, generic policies and procedures that actually don't reflect their operations. So, for example, they might have a student handbook that talks about fire and evacuation emergency procedures. They might talk about what to do in the event that you have an accident or an injury on the RTO's premises, but they deliver purely online, and there is no way known that that's policy and procedure in relation to fire emergencies and evacuations would even apply, because there is no physical classroom where students actually attend, and therefore they would never actually have the opportunity to injure themselves. Now, I'm sure in those circumstances, the RTO is not expecting the student, if they injure themselves at home, for example, because they're studying online, to contact the RTO and report an injury. That's not the intention, although that is what the student handbook would tend to reflect. So again, just making sure that the pre-enrollment documentation that you have available on your website is accurate, not just in terms of the courses and delivery modes that you're offering, the fees, the currency of the training products, the course durations, whether there's work-based training involved, all of those sorts of things, but also making sure that any policies and procedures, any forms and documents that you have on there are compliant with your delivery mode and your operations. Just on that, what I'm seeing a lot of at the moment as well on websites, two very common things that ASQA are picking up are enrolment forms that are not compliant with a VETMIS 8, and the other one is shopping carts for online stores or payment gateways that allow students to pay in advance for their courses when they're booking their enrolment, for example, and it exceeds the $1,500. They say that they're not exceeding that amount in their policies and procedures. They have no alternative fee payment mechanisms up front. However, their shopping cart does actually allow a student to pay for an entire course, which exceeds $1,500, and therefore that would also be a breach of the standards for RTOs 2015. Another thing that is coming up quite frequently in the audit reports that are coming across my desk for AAT purposes is in relation to human resources. We see a lot of non-compliance around trainers and assessors' CVs that have been provided as evidence where the trainer and assessor is currently known to ASQA to be working across multiple RTOs, and so an RTO might have that trainer and assessor listed in their application, whether it be RTO registration or an amendment to scope or whatever the case may be. They will be listing that trainer and assessor as being full-time or completing a significant number of hours per week, for example, in delivering and assessing at that particular RTO. But their CV might say that they're working full-time for another RTO, or ASQA themselves may be aware through other audits and investigations that they're undertaking that that particular trainer and assessor is actually working a substantial amount of hours at another RTO. So what they're coming back and saying is, well, this is unreasonable that a trainer and assessor can be working full-time in one RTO and working full-time in another RTO. And similarly, a similar thing is happening with CEOs. So where you might own an RTO and you're looking at registering a second RTO, what they're saying is, how can you possibly monitor the governance and compliance requirements of two RTOs full-time concurrently? So they're one of the issues in relation to human resources that we're seeing a lot of at the moment. And of course, the other issue, which is related to a LinkedIn article that I wrote a while ago, and I'll post a link to it in the comments for those of you who are watching who may not be aware of it, or those watching later down the track. The issue is around fraudulent qualifications, or those students who were not eligible to receive qualifications as trainers and assessors because an RTO was not CRICOS registered, but they enrolled the student despite the fact that they were not entitled to. So what we're seeing a lot of at the moment is a lot of domestic providers who are not CRICOS registered being caught up in this situation where international students on a student visa are approaching them for enrolment. They're gaining enrolment in those courses and they are being certified in those courses, but the provider is not CRICOS registered, and there was no system in place to prevent that student from getting enrolled in the course. And therefore, it only comes up during an ASQA investigation, for example, or an audit with a CRICOS provider, that that particular student gained certification in a course that they were not entitled to be enrolled in, and all of a sudden, in an audit that was not even intended for you, you are being picked up because you enrolled an international student on a student visa when you were not CRICOS registered. Now, linked to that, of course, is the fact that you need to be a CRICOS registered provider to accept enrolment for any international student studying any course in Australia. And this is an important point that you need to get your heads around, because traditionally, CRICOS providers did not have to, how can I say this? The course did not have to be registered on CRICOS if it was less than 12 weeks. So anyone delivering a short course, for example, did not have to register that course on CRICOS. And in fact, there is no provision for that to happen anyway. But the way that the ESOS Act and the NVR Act and the Standards for RTOs 2015 are now reading and are being interpreted by regulators is that any training product that is being delivered to an international student on a student visa must be CRICOS registered. So that includes anyone who is delivering first aid training, for example, RSA, RSG, white card, confined spaces, any of those high-risk work licence courses, any course that has traditionally been deemed a short course. Skill sets, again, they're not qualifications, and that is what typically used to be registered on CRICOS. So you need to be really careful around whether or not you can accept enrolment of international students on a student visa, because what's happening is those students are then being picked up as trainers and assessors, for example, in other RTOs that are being audited, leaving you exposed to significant risk. Some of the issues that I wanted to talk about in relation to training and assessment are really in relation to off-the-shelf materials that we see people are purchasing. We are getting a lot of non-compliance and AAT matters where providers have purchased and spent a significant amount of money on off-the-shelf training and assessment materials, often with an audit guarantee. There are a number of companies around at the moment, if you have a look around, promoting that their products have an audit guarantee, and that if you fail an audit, they will fix them at no cost to you, and so forth. The reality is, if they fail the audit at the moment, because you no longer have that guarantee of a 20 working day rectification period and it's an immediate cancellation, you don't have the luxury of getting it fixed. What are some of the issues that we're finding with these materials? Some of the issues are that they are just not contextualised. So you might have a learner group, for example, that has low language literacy and numeracy skills. They may be people who have a very low educational background. For example, they might be at an ACSF level 2 or 3, for example, but you're enrolling them in an advanced diploma which has a language literacy numeracy requirement of an ACSF level 4 or 5, for example. And the training and assessment materials do not cater for the needs of those people who come from a low language literacy numeracy background. Likewise, for someone operating at an ACSF level 2, very low language literacy numeracy skills, one of the other issues that we see is that there are many online courses and even face-to-face courses who provide learner guides that are big chunks of text. And for people who have very low literacy skills, and they don't have the ability to read very well and comprehend what they're reading because they just don't have the language literacy numeracy skills, it can be very difficult for them to have any sort of learning experience that is conducive to retention of knowledge and skills. And then therefore being able to complete a competent assessment process. So that's something that we're seeing a lot of at the moment is materials that have not been contextualised to a learner cohort. Another example is where the delivery and assessment method is around online delivery, for example, and there is no assessment by the RTO pre-enrolment as to the learner's digital literacy skills, and there is insufficient support or instruction about how to use the online learning system. And so what we find is that there are assessments that are quite comprehensive with limited instructions to the assessor or the student. The student might enrol in the online learning program and not have the digital literacy skills to be able to complete it. They may not even have all of the equipment required to run the training and assessment program. There are often cases that come across our desk in audit reports where the pre-enrolment material just hasn't provided the system requirements for a student to complete the qualification to a satisfactory standard. One of the final things that I just wanted to talk about in today's live video that we're seeing a lot of at the moment is with a proliferation of consultants out there in the market. Excuse me. What we're finding is that there's a lot of people who are saying that they know what they're doing and they're charging vast amounts of money to perform jobs, but they actually don't have the skills or knowledge to be able to perform that job. We also seem to be seeing a lot of audit reports at the moment and evidence that has been submitted to the regulator whereby those same consultants, and it does tend to be the same consultants over and over again. For example, out of the last 4 audit reports that have come across my desk for an AAT matter, 3 of those 4 audits were the same consultant. I'm not going to name and shame. It's not what this is about. What it is about, though, is about executive managers and owners of RTOs being a bit more diligent about the people that they're engaging to perform work. So what we're seeing a lot of, for example, is those consultants are actually stealing the intellectual property of other consultants and on selling it to you as a customer as their own product. And then they might try to change some of the wording and that makes it not compliant, or they don't do anything with it at all and it just gets submitted the way it is. But there is a clear difference between the quality of the material that's been submitted as rectification evidence and the other material that consultant has had their hand on. It used to be a rule where you say if you paid peanuts you get monkeys. That rule no longer applies in this industry, unfortunately. What we're finding more and more is that even though these consultants don't necessarily have the knowledge and skills to be able to perform the work that they're doing, what we're finding is that they're still charging the same amounts as highly qualified professionals who have been doing these jobs for a very long time. So what you really need to be doing is making sure that the person that you have engaged to do the job is competent, qualified, experienced, and has the knowledge and skills that they say they do. We often recommend to people that if you don't know, you don't know. However, one thing that you should always do is ask for recommendations. If you know, we sometimes see on LinkedIn when people are saying, oh, has anybody worked with this person before? Can anyone recommend a good consultant? Those sorts of conversations are really helpful, and LinkedIn can be very helpful for that purpose. But I would just like to point out to people that you really do need to take the opportunity when you're engaging a consultant to make sure that they do have the knowledge and skills and professionalism that they're promoting that they do have. What I also wanted to remind you is that on the RTO Doctor Facebook page, there are 2 series of 30 days, 30 tips videos. They are free and available for anyone to watch at any time. All you have to do is go to the RTO Doctor Facebook page. You don't even have to like the page, to be honest, to watch them. Although I recommend that you do, because we do often provide industry updates on the RTO Doctor Facebook page. However, there are 2 series of 30 days, 30 tips. They're for 60 videos, all around about the same duration as this one. Some of them are a little bit shorter. They will provide you with free information, tools and resources to enable you to maintain the compliance of your RTO. Another thing that you can look out for is on LinkedIn. I have written a few articles on there. One of them in particular that you may find very helpful is called "Are Your Systems Putting You at Risk?" It is a sample of a desktop audit that I conducted for one of my clients, and all of the RTOs and student names and trainer names and everything have been changed. But it is an example of some of the things that I've been talking about in this video, about how one small non-compliance with one provider led to the risk of, I think it was 5 or 6 other providers being exposed to non-compliance that they weren't even being looked at previously. So it's a really good case study, if you like, of how an ASQA auditor might be able to identify non-compliance in your RTO before they've even stepped in your door. And of course, the other thing that you have at your disposal is a book that I published late last year called Cricos CPR, Top 5 Tips for Rescuing Your RTO. It's available on Amazon. You can search for it on Amazon website, or you can get it from our website. If you want to contact me directly, I'm happy to send you a hard copy. We just received our 2nd delivery. The book has been sold out twice now, but I'm happy to send you a hard copy signed and send it directly to you if you would like that. While it is called Top 5 Tips for your RTO, it actually contains a lot more tips than 5. It really is just 5 subheadings that you can use to really focus on ensuring compliance in your RTO. Of course, we're always here to answer any questions that you have, and I encourage you to please be in touch. As CEOs and senior managers and anyone involved in the industry, in fact, I'd really encourage you to really pay attention to some of the things that I've spoken about in today's video. They are becoming more and more prevalent in ASQA audits and cancellations, and they do say that forearmed is forewarned. So best of luck in maintaining compliance, and I'll be in touch with you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye for now.